Good morning. And I'll say what I said last week. It is toasty warm right here. So if you want to be toasty warm, you need to be moving up where the air is nice and will just make you feel really good. Our announcements today are a few, and they said, Ginny and Connie said, we got a lot going on this morning, so let's get in there and get going. So here we go. Today, Barney and Frog have had the wonderful privilege of living together for 58 years. Happy anniversary. I think they've tolerated both of each other well. They could do another 58, right? They could do it well. Oh, Barney, I think, is apologizing, saying, no, I'm not in for 58 more, but... Okay, youth rally. Next week is our youth rally starting on Wednesday for the Mission Center, so please make sure all your youth or people that you feel like are in that category know about youth rally. There is in your bulletin a little flyer that kind of details the times and the dates for that. Today I was hoping to make the announcement that Ron Price was coming home finally. Debbie alerted me that now he's got to be approved for some oxygen, so it could be tomorrow or Tuesday, but please keep him in your prayers as he is ready to come home, and I'm sure Judy's ready to have him there too. There is pastorate tonight at 7 o'clock at the church. We're trying to go a little later for those Chiefs fans so you can see the entire game. Worship commission then will be at 6 o'clock for those of you on the worship commission. And then in February, Center Place Singers are going to have their annual concert on February 9th. Edith Lemasters has tickets, so if you would like that chicken dinner, Center Place Singers concert, see Edith for tickets. And in the back, after church today, Steve and Kurt have set out your annual, it's not called tithing anymore, contributors annual statement on the back wooden table. It's alphabetical, so if you see your name there, please grab that and take it home. We have been talking on and off about other members from East Alton joining our congregation in the future, and that was voted on last week to close the East Alton congregation, and we should have about 30 families, so about 40 to 50 individuals who would be coming to us starting March the 8th. We just want to make sure that you all are aware of that when we see someone new that we're not quite familiar with, that we are all making sure that they are welcome, that we introduce ourselves to them, and that we make them feel like this is their home. They're not just coming to Village Heights, they're coming to a place where they can call home. So we need to be aware of that in the coming weeks in case we have visitors that are coming a little bit early. But more details will be coming to you on that, and some events will be planned around that as well. Then my last announcement is going to come from Kurt.
You just made the announcement for me.
I did? This was it? The statements? Woohoo! See, the Chiefs are going to win today for sure, aren't they? Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. Before I forget it, we're going to be displaying a lot of pictures on the screen up here. So if it would be easier for you to see, feel free to move. Once we get started and you think you could see better, feel free to do that. It was a year ago, last November, I think, somewhere in that time frame, Ginny invited me to go on a Holy Land trip with her with the Historical Site Foundation. And at that time, I put a lot of thought into it and considered it a long time, and I still had my dog, and he was going through his health issues, but I finally convinced myself that I needed to do this, that the opportunity to go may not come up again, the opportunity to go with Ginny may not come up again, so I told Ginny yes. So I want to publicly thank her today for extending that invitation to me for that opportunity. Now, I still kind of fought it along the way, kind of dragging my heels and all that stuff, and even Ginny was dragging her heels toward the end because of some of the issues that we were confronted with. But it was an extraordinary experience, and we're excited today to share that experience with you. I hope that as we go, you will feel some of the feelings that we had as we were walking the paths that Jesus walked.
Well, I just have a little comment. She wasn't packed a year ahead of time like I was. So clearly, if you've ever gone on a trip with me, or when you do go on a trip with me, we pack early, and Connie wasn't ready. But I think the Lord stepped in and filled in there. I have a scripture for you to share with you today that came to me about this journey and about the theme today. This is a very non-traditional service, so if you're looking for high church, you're not going to get it here today because we're going to be very casual, and Connie will talk to you more about that. But my scripture comes from Matthew 10:35. Then touched he their eyes, saying, according to your faith, be it unto you. And their eyes were opened. And straightly he charged them, saying, keep my commandments, and see ye, tell no man in this place, that no man know it. But they, when they were departed, spread abroad the fame in all the country. We hope to spread some of this information with you as we share our pilgrimage as we walk where Jesus walked.
You can sit down now. On our trip, we had the opportunity to share a meal with a family from Palestine. They opened their home to us, had us in. We had the traditional meal that we had several times throughout the journey. We interacted with them throughout the evening, and it was an experience I was kind of nervous about, but in the end, I think it was for sure one of the highlights of our journey is being able to visit with them in their environment, hear their story. It was a Christian Palestine family, and it was just a wonderful experience. And we have some pictures of them in our slideshow, so when we get there, you will understand what the experience that we had. So this prayer for peace that we have this morning is a prayer for Palestine. Pray with me. God of justice, bless those who work for peace through justice. God of mercy, even as we long to understand that which is often beyond our comprehension, we lay before you the hearts, minds, and bodies of all those suffering from conflict in the occupied Palestinian territory in Israel and from the ongoing occupation. Amen. Now, as Jerry works his way up here, oops, I got to turn this on. I did not realize until I went on this journey of the church history in Israel. And we happen to have our own personal connection there with some of that church history in Israel with one of Jerry's great uncles. And so he's going to share in the offertory today and also share a little bit about his great uncle. And this is his great uncle and aunt.
Yes. You see Homer Alfred Doty and his wife Maud Doty. The girl you see there is their niece. Her name is Geraldine Bullock. So she would be my first cousin once removed, I believe. I'm not so much familiar with her in terms of knowing her personally, but I did know Homer and Maud personally. I'd been in their home in Traverse City, Michigan. And I just wanted to take a personal privilege here and share with you just some things about that experience, being in their home and their connection with my grandparents, Byron and Christy Doty. Byron is the brother of Homer, and Christy is the sister of Maud. So brothers married sisters, kind of like in the LeMaster's family as a familiar, and also in the Christensen family. The other pictures here also relate to family issues or family things. You'll see the trunk that's there. That trunk was in my parents' home for decades, and that was in our house, in our home for years, and down in the lower part there, and it has their address, Traverse City, Michigan. But that's the trunk that. Whoops. Anyway, it'll come up again.
There we go.
Yes. Lee Updike came to our home when we just recently moved last year to go through stuff that we thought maybe the church would be interested in having. And one of the things that he was asking while he was there, we had church pictures and other kinds of things that we gave to the church. And one of the things that he asked about when he was there, did I know a man by the name of Doty, who was a photographer and who took pictures. And so I said, just a minute, and I went into the other room and I brought back this box, which was about that size, filled with pictures taken in Palestine. And these were taken by Homer. He was an avid photographer. And so when Lee Updike saw that box, he just almost came unglued. He was so excited to find that. And so we gave that to him for the church. And the more personal thing that happened with my grandfather and the church connection, because his brother Homer was already baptized into the church. My grandfather didn't have anything to do with it, but he called up my grandfather one time when he was a young man, and he said, we're having a church conference in Bay City, Michigan. Would you come and play a trombone in the orchestra? And so I said, sure. He'd like to play, musical instruments and so on. So he did. And I'm not going into any details of what happened there, but other than to say that during that conference, and when he was listening to the speaker of the conference, he was touched by the Holy Spirit in a way that he had never been touched before. And as a result of that and so on, other experiences, he himself was baptized along with his wife, and that was a connection to our church there. And so it was, who knows, maybe if that connection hadn't been made, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be, maybe, who knows. But so anyway, my mother and father eventually, because both sides were now members of the church, they had a family that connected. So that was an experience there. And I very much appreciate, and I don't really have any comments about the other pictures. The upper left-hand corner is, I think, where they lived in Palestine. And I do have, I think, a letter opener, or I have a couple other items that I didn't think about that came from their collection and so on, but they did have a lot of things that they brought back. The main point is, I don't want to get into any more of their time here. I know they've got a lot of pictures to share. I would like to have us share in this offertory experience. And as you share your mission tithes, or if you happen to be on the regular e-tithing, we use this time to express our gratitude for God's many gifts in your life and to reflect on how we respond faithfully to those blessings. When we understand God's love and grace are given freely to us, we respond out of gratitude and are liberated to share freely in return. So we would invite now those taking up the offering to please come forward. Eternal God, may you bless this congregation as we respond, and may this response demonstrate our willingness to offer every dimension of our lives to you, Lord, is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, I think we're ready to begin. At least I have a few things to go over, and then we'll start the slideshow. First of all, I want to thank Barb Walden, and if you know Barb Walden, you know who I'm speaking of. She's the one that created kind of the backdrop of the slideshow. I started our slideshow and thought, this is going to, I remember when I did them for work, and you want to have a nice background and all this stuff, and I'm thinking, do I have time to do all that stuff? Just pictures alone was time consuming. So Barb, I saw where she did a workshop for the group in California and presented a PowerPoint, and I thought, well, why reinvent the wheel? So I texted her, and we communicated, and she I don't know, it wasn't AirDrop, but it was Google Drive. Through Google Drive, got it to me just like that. So it helped my part of this tremendously. This is a 14-day journey. We visited 4 continents, and we think at least 17 cities, and had at least 5 to 7 stops a day. And most of the time, Ginny and I reflected, we didn't have a lot of time. People said, well, it was for Ginny probably in most cases, but it was challenging to make each stop a spiritual experience because you were shuttled in and you were shuttled out, because there was another group coming in. It was their high season of tourism. And I think in a couple pictures I have, you will see the buses in Jerusalem just bumper to bumper going up the road. So there was a lot to see in a short period of time, packed in each day. And also, a lot of these places, allegedly this happened here. We have 2 or 3 places where they say they knew for sure Jesus stood there, or they knew for sure this was the tomb he was buried in, but there's a lot of allegedly this is the spot. Would you agree with that? It was close by. And we'd have to thank the Franciscan priests for their restoration, preservation, and work and their presence was a span of about 800 years doing all this work to restore and maintain and preserve the life of Jesus in Israel. There's no way we feel like we can share the detail and depth of this experience, but we'll do our best. We probably each took around 1,000 slides or pictures. Today we have around 200 pictures, and we've already discussed the stopping point if we think we need to stop. We do promise to be done by 1:30 so you can get to the Chiefs game, get home in front of the TV, but we hope it's long before that. But there was a lot to see. We won't remember everything we wanted to say, but we'll try. And I told Ginny, stand up anytime I forget something and you want to say it. This is a non-traditional service, so we're going to narrate. We're going to share testimonies throughout the slideshow, but feel free to ask questions. We'll do our best to answer those. We may or may not have the answer. We do have a table in the back with some of our souvenirs and so on, that if you have some questions you want to ask, you can ask them there as well. Also, we scattered in the pews some handouts which highlight the journey. And this is something Barb also did as well. We're going to start on day 5. We do not start on day 1 because Ginny and I did not go to the Jordan piece of the trip. And raise your hand if you don't have one, because we have some more scattered throughout, and Steve had some. If you don't want to keep yours, just leave it in the pew, because Ginny and I are going to do more presentations and individually, so we can use these where we go other places. So if you don't want to keep it, just leave it in the pew and pick it up. One thing I discovered is there's no short distances. Sometimes when you're reading the scriptures or hearing the scriptures, they say, well, Jesus went down to Jericho, or Jesus went to Jerusalem, or the disciples went here. And when you're traveling in a bus, you realize that was not an easy journey in itself. We could get there in a few hours, maybe minutes, but for them, it had to take days for them to get from one place to another. So that also, came to light for me. You will discover that Ginny and I had the same trip, but we had different perspectives on things and different testimonies of things. When we started our journey, our guide said that his wish for us was that the scriptures would no longer be black and white, that we would be, that they would come alive for us, we would be living them in color. And I have found that to be so true as I sit in a service or even watch on TV or hear something on the news about Jerusalem or another place that we went to. I automatically have that colorful picture in my head. Not too long ago, somebody mentioned Jerusalem, and you'll see the slide, but I automatically see that picture of the hillside with that gold dome. And last week, when Robin Linkhart was talking about the Jordan River and the baptisms that occurred in the Jordan River, it was there, just like that, and I could see that. And I had some pictures on a flash drive in the back, and I wanted to run back there and pop them up on the screen, but I also didn't want to create any kind of scene, so I didn't do that. But it did do that for us. It brought the scriptures alive for us, Jesus' stories alive for us, the disciples, and as I said, we'll try to do our best to share those things as we go here today. Ginny, you have anything you want to add?
Well, I just wanted to add that, along with Connie, this was a life-changing trip for me. Connie is the educator, the teacher, the principal. So you'll see she will give you the facts, the spots, the where we went, how we went. I'm the crier. My cousin Gwen here at Carlisle is here. Oh, I'm sorry, Burns is here. We are a family of criers, but I'm the nurse, the feeler, the experience. I was just all in, and Connie kept me on track because I'll cry through this whole thing because Jesus lived. This pilgrimage for us proved to me, I'm a faithful person, but it proved to me that Jesus lived. He was here. He gave us all these stories. They're true. I can't say I didn't believe them before this trip, but after this trip, I think we experienced them. And I'm going to give you the crying testimonies of just a couple of them so that you can feel the depth of what we experienced on this trip. So I just want to stick that in real quick. So get ready because the crying has begun. Okay?
And if you don't mind, we thought we would sit down while we did this, and we'll kind of skim through the highlights. So if you want to take a look at your handout, first of all, the picture that I have up there, whoops, in case you ever consider doing this trip yourself, I would highly recommend going to Jordan. I did not go to Jordan because it added 3 or 4 days onto the trip, and at the point where we had to commit, my dog was still around and I didn't want to leave him that long, just things of life. I was afraid to be gone that long.
And a couple more $1,000 as well.
Yeah, it was another $1,000 too, but I would have gone to Jordan. So if you have the money and you have the time, I would highly recommend going to Jordan. And these are just a couple pictures of the people of the group that did go to Jordan. Large majority of them did go. And our dates were October 24th through November 5th, if you want to know those dates when we went. And here we are at the KCI airport, all excited and fresh and ready to go. This is where we met some of our crew in Chicago. The gal on the right, far right, is a college friend of mine. She came from Washington. The rest of the crew, some of them came from Texas, some came from Iowa. The gal on the far left, Bev Tyree, I believe is her name. Yep. Bev, you'll see another picture of her, is 87 years old. She did not miss a beat.
And she fell in Chicago, and what we think is fractured her wrist. She was in the sling, and she put the rest of us to shame how fast she kept up with everything.
Never complained and never got sick. Was one of the few that didn't get sick. And to mention how we met each other, we were all sitting in the terminal area for our gate, and I don't know who it was, but I was holding the water bottle that everyone had been given, and it may have been Ginny said, Connie, walk around with your water bottle and see if anybody recognizes your water bottle. Well, as soon as I got up to walk around with my water bottle, I saw the lady in the middle with the blue, and she had a Community of Christ t-shirt on. So we had found our people, our peeps. And you will see Ginny's mouth open a lot. I don't know why. She would have to answer that question herself, but she's having fun. And there we are in Israel. And this was our first night there, and that we arrived in Tel Aviv, and that was our sunset that night. And it was beautiful out our window. We got a water view room, so it was nice. This is the first morning, and as I said, we're starting on day 5 here. And I mentioned before, I did not realize the church history in Israel. And we met with Jean Holmes, and some of you know who Jean Holmes is. Her mother actually went to this congregation, Helen Whitty, is that correct? And and Jean and Reed would occasionally come to our congregation when they were in the country. But there was a group of church members from Maine, and I can't remember if they were after Joseph, if it was when the church kind of broke up for a while. They went back to Maine, and then they loaded boats, and this is an amazing story. They loaded boats with ships, I shouldn't say boats, ships with houses. They broke down their homes and put them in the ships, am I correct, Ginny? And took them all the way to Tel Aviv and settled in Tel Aviv. And it's called the Jaffa Colony. It's the American colony. And here is Jean giving us that information on our first morning. And that was our introduction to the Mediterranean Sea, which was absolutely beautiful. And there's Ginny with her mouth open again. She doesn't do it with Peter. She just does it with me, I guess. This is the Jaffa Colony that's in Tel Aviv, and the different homes that are in that small colony of homes. And this is I was going to say main home, but M-A-I-N, but it's also the main friendship house. And Jean lives in Jean and Reed bought this home, and they lived in the upstairs, and she continues to live in the upstairs part of this building. And these are some artifacts that were in the building. And then in the basement, which was very interesting because it's a very old home, they set up a slideshow and a history of the colony. And then our next step was Caesarea National Park. And the next stop, Caesarea National Park is the King Herod's entrance into Israel. And that's where he established his main port to get into Israel off the Mediterranean Sea. And there's our guide, who was an absolutely wonderful guide, giving us a description of everything that's at the national park. And that's the amphitheater that they still use it today. You'll see new chairs down there. They had a huge speaker system and everything. And some of the statues and artifacts around that national park. There's Ginny holding up the walls of that archway. And there's a real interesting story, but I don't quite remember it, as to how those arches are built. Do you remember it, Ginny? Okay. There's me in front of the sign. And on the far the backside are the aqueducts, which we go to next. And what just amazed me throughout this whole trip was the architecture, the intelligence of these people that built these, like the stadium there, the aqueducts, the pyramids, just everything. That's someone I found on the streets of Tel Aviv. Again, this is just some of the graffiti. There was a lot of graffiti everywhere. And the eyes had a significance. Ginny, do you remember that?
Yeah, I asked him what these eyes were because we kept seeing these eyes around there. And it was just it's sort of like saying some of our things that we say, just not significant in that it was the eyes watching you, but rather it was keep your eyes open, keep alert. It was more of a, I don't know, graffiti kind of thing.
That was our first of many falafels. And I thought falafel was a meat, but it's not. It looks like a meatball, but it's really more like cornmeal. And they put it in pita bread, and
It's awful.
it depends upon where you have it, but they were pretty dry. But they had French fries everywhere.
Yeah. They think we love
Every
French. They
meal,
think every American loves
whatever
French
the
fries.
meal was, it seemed like we got French fries with it as well. And little packets of ketchup. And we could get our Diet Coke. Some of us were afraid we wouldn't get our caffeine fixes and that sort of thing, but we did. This is the Basilica of the Annunciation, and this is where the angel Gabriel came to Mary and told her that she was going to have the Christ child, that she would be having a baby, and it would be the Christ child. And these churches are absolutely stunning on the inside. We're just showing 2 or 3 pictures of the inside of many that we went through, and they're breathtaking, stunning.
Yes, and everywhere we went, there were people worshiping, praying, kneeling, and all day and all night. They're at these different people from all over the world.
Just more pictures of inside, and that's a view of the altar from the back. This is the outside. And now there's just an idea of what the Sea of Galilee looks like. The Sea of Galilee is actually a lake, not a sea.
We learned a lot of little tidbits along the way, and back in Jesus' time, they didn't have a term. They didn't have the term lake, but any large body of water they would call a sea. So you can see this big kidney-shaped model of the Sea of Galilee is what it was shaped like.
And this is when we arrived at our hotel in Tiberias that evening on the Sea of Galilee.
So I'm going to talk here comes the tears. I'm going to talk a little bit, my testimony about the Sea of Galilee, and Connie can jump in there.
This was the boat we rode in when we were on the Sea of Galilee. Now I'll let Ginny go to her story.
We'll go one more, Connie. I think there's a picture of the sea in the morning. It's kind of, there you go, okay. So I want to take you to this place because here's my testimony of probably, I would say, of the 51 of us that were on this trip, I would say the majority had the strongest testimonial experience at the Sea of Galilee. So I want to take you there for a minute. I want you to imagine, first thing in the morning, very, very early, we get on this old boat that's supposed to be fashioned like the boat in Jesus' time. And everybody knows the story of Matthew of Jesus and the Sea of Galilee. But we get up and we go out, and there's a mist across the water. It's the sun's starting to come up, but it's very misty, and it's very quiet. It's very still. You can see the water is very still. And we're sitting there on the boat, and the driver turns it off, and it's quiet, just amazingly quiet.
And Peter Smith, he was our pastor on the trip. You can see him there in the picture on the left, the striped shirt. He starts reading the scripture of when the disciples were on the boat and Peter woke up. The disciple Peter woke up and he couldn't find Jesus, and he looked out across the water. And coming across the mist was Jesus. And Peter was amazed, and he reached out to him, and our Peter said to us, how many of you have been in this dark, deep spot like Peter was when he was falling into the water? And Jesus has reached out and lifted you up. How many of you have experienced Jesus coming to you in your deepest, darkest times? And 51 people all went to that place that I hope you'll go to today, to think about when you have been at a place, your deepest, darkest place, and you didn't know when to turn, but you reached out to Jesus, and he was there for you, and he pulled you up and brought you to a better place. And as all 51 of us sat there in that quiet, in that still, in that mist, I can't tell you what other people were experiencing, but to me, it was such a holy place. The background hills behind you, that's where Jesus preached. That's where Beatitudes were, where the Sermon on the Mount, all the teaching of Jesus were happening there. And we are sitting on that water, and we're thinking about his teachings and what he has taught us, and how many times we've been in dark places, but yet we reached out to the scripture, we reached out to what Jesus taught us, and we grew from that, and we learned, and we were raised up by Jesus. And so to be sitting there at that place where Jesus actually was, where he reached out to Peter and brought him up out of the darkness, we felt that Jesus was there with us. We felt Jesus touched us there, because in his stories, he was here to teach us how to deal with those deep, dark places in our lives, how to deal with those struggles that we have. And so it was very touching for each individual to experience that. Now, the sun came on up, and we could see the country, we could see the hillside there, and she'll show you more pictures of where we went to the Church of the Beatitudes. But that spot, at that early morning with that sun coming up, was, I think, probably to most of us where Jesus touched us in a very strong way and said, this is real. You're here for a reason. Your pilgrimage to come here and to see this is to show you, I'm here, I was here, I'm alive, and this is why I came here, to reach out, to heal, to lift up out of the darkness, and to give that spiritual experience to each person individually. So that's my testimony about the Sea of Galilee. You want to talk about that, Connie?
You did a good job.
Okay. And there we are on the boat. It's a old looking boat, but it held all 51 of us.
It did. Moving on to our next stop was the Capernaum, which they call the actual town of Jesus. And I don't know if I had heard of Capernaum much prior to this trip, but they're saying that this is where Jesus spent most of his time, years, was in Capernaum. And what you're seeing is they've excavated and the old town, and it is visible. And our guide was giving us again the description of what occurred on these grounds, what we would see. This is the White Synagogue, I believe was the name of it, where Peter worshipped and Jesus worshipped and ministered. The town is it's also the grounds where, I think we'll see it here, Peter's mother-in-law lived.
And this was the spot. You remember when Jesus said to Peter that you're my rock, and I will.
Uh-huh. I'm sorry, I thought I had a picture of that, but
You're my rock, and I will build my church on your foundation. This is where it happened.
Yeah.
In this city.
And if you can see through that glass, below that glass is the actual home of Peter's mother-in-law. This is the Church of the Beatitudes. Beautiful grounds here. This is the inside, a couple different views of the altar there. The ceiling, the floor, that's my foot on the floor, the mosaic floor. The gardens are beautiful. And the fishes and the, I can't
You walked up to the
read.
church. You
Yeah.
walked up to the church, and as you walked up, it'd have each one of the Beatitudes for you to read as you walked up the hill.
That right there. There was, those were outlining the walkway as we walked up towards the church. This was our fishes and loaves meal. I did not have fish. I did not want fish that I could see the eyeballs, so I had something.
I had to experience the whole
something
thing.
different.
That's my fish there on the left, and he was looking at me, but I ate him anyway.
Ginny just jumped in. That's some of our group. I had chicken, I believe. This is the Church of Loaves and Fishes at Tabga. I believe that's the way you pronounce it. The artifact that you see there on the left is an actual baptismal font. They didn't give us any visual of how a person was baptized in that, but that was the answer I received when I asked what it was. And this is more of that church and the altar with the fishes and loaves in front of the altar. More of that same church. This is the Church of the Primacy, and what Ginny mentioned is the people, we'd see people almost at every altar bowing and offering prayer or meditating in front of that. And in a statement they made, and it kind of stuck with me down here in these waters, is where Jesus selected both, I think, Capernaum and here is where Jesus selected some of his disciples in these two places, and that the actual waters there is maybe where he selected some of his fisherman disciples. I don't know. We've thrown in some pictures of the people in our group. You may know some of them. Some of them you may not. Some of them names I remember, some I don't. And this is the Jordan River, and it was quite moving, I thought. And I'll show you one of my favorite slides of the whole trip is in this. But there's the Jordan River. It's our group down there, some of them entering the river. Was a baptism. There were several actual baptisms going on, I believe. Different groups baptizing people in the river. There I am standing in the river. On the left is the scripture about the Jordan River, and they had throughout the area that scripture in different languages. I'm Swedish, so I took a picture of the Swedish board. I also took a picture of the Hawaiian pigeon because I thought that was kind of interesting, but different for different cultures. The water itself was kind of smelly, stinky. This is one of my favorite shots, and I don't know if you can see it in the background, but there are men on the back there fishing. And then we have the people being baptized in the front. And to me, that you have your fishers of fish and you have your fishers of men. And I don't know, it just jumped out at me when I took this picture, was looking at this scene even without the camera in front of me. It was just very, very moving. This is just, little shacks or kiosks that they had along the valley as we traveled around and stopped, and there'd be a lot of open markets with fruit and breads.
A lot of fruit and bread. 93% of the area is vegetarian. So you saw a lot of different fruits and breads everywhere you went.
And this is the sunset at Sea of Galilee that night. And we thought we'd sing the old path here. This gives a history of when the old path was written and how it was inspired by this path. And I can't read very well that bottom one.
It's at the foot of Mount Zion, and so it's really a pathway. And so the person that wrote the hymn Old Path, which is part of our being as a church, was inspired by this. And so we thought we'd insert into the service hymn 244. Lori's going to play it, and we're just going to sing the Old Path. I think we'll stop there. We've got quite a bit more to go, but we just wanted to kind of stick that in so you could kind of see that correlation there. We're going to pick up the pace a little bit here.
I'll try to move a little quicker. I told Ginny this would be hard to do. We probably would needed a separate day, but we're on our road to Jerusalem, and that our guide pointed out is it's not the tomb of Jesus, but it's a stone that represented this would be similar to the stone that would be in front of his tomb. We stopped at a olive tree carving factory. They did some hand carving and some machine carving, but beautiful things. These are some things, and you'll see some things out on the table. Do you have some things?
Yeah, I have a few things out on the table of the carvings. But the importance here is that these were all carved from the olive trees that have been there for thousands of years, the Mount of Olives. And these statuaries and so forth are made out of that wood. They let it season for 7 years, and then they carve it into these beautiful pieces. I saw this picture up there of the lion and the lamb, and I inquired, hey, I'd like to buy that and bring it back to my congregation. I want you to guess how much money that costs. That one little painting, $7,600. So I didn't.
It's still there.
It's still hanging there.
It's there. But there were some beautiful pieces there.
Okay, another meal. This is the common meal, rice and chicken, but besides falafel.
This was good.
We were on our way to the Church of Nativity. And this, of course, the young men are doing that to bring in money to the family.
So it's $1 to get your picture to take his picture or hold the
sheep.
little lamb.
Yeah, that's a lamb. It's not a
Yep.
goat. It's a lamb. And he handed him over to me, so I gave him a snuggle.
This is just some guys that were playing backgammon, and they really weren't paying too much attention to us as we were watching them until we asked them who was winning. And then the winner immediately raised his hand. These are just the streets of Bethlehem. And then we're going to the Church of the Nativity, which is where you will find the cave, not the stable.
Jesus was born in a cave, not in a stable. But on this site in this church, and the Catholic churches, all these sites, you had to bow through this entryway to walk in, and then go to where he was, with the actual spot where Jesus was born. You had to go down in this cave.
This is entering the cave. And this is the actual manger spot, they say, where Jesus was born. This is the Church of St. Catherine in Bethlehem. This is also the Shepherd's Fields, where we went from the Church of the Nativity.
To where the shepherds were tending their flocks.
And there's some of the caves that they lived in. And this is our arrival, our first visit in Jerusalem was at the Mount of Olives. And like I said, this is probably one of my favorite views and pictures too, is this view of Jerusalem.
Can you see us in there? I'm in the middle.
I'm in black, so I was hard to find. I'm kind of in the back.
We got more pictures out for you.
Yeah. There's Ginny's experience on her camel. This is a picture. It's just breathtaking. And we went to Old Jerusalem. This is where the temple is, and the Western Wall, and other parts of Jesus Jerusalem. We were entered through the Dung Gate, and that just gives a little history of that. Our guide telling us about Jerusalem, Old Jerusalem, more pictures of the grounds. And then this is the teaching steps. And this is one of the few places that they said, for sure, Jesus stood here. And exactly where I'm standing. And it was frustrating because I wanted to stand there. And there were several people getting their picture taken, and I wasn't getting in there. And they kept saying, come on, we got to go. And I'm like, I am not leaving until I get my picture taken on these steps, this spot.
Because we knew for sure that Jesus had been there. We knew that he taught on those steps and stood there and taught on those steps. So that was significant.
And don't ask me how they know, but they told us that. This is the entrance into the Western Wall. There's a women's entrance and a men's entrance. And we'll share our experience here, but because Ginny and I had two totally different perspectives of the situation here, which will be, I think, interesting for you to hear.
So before we went, they told us, write down on a little piece of paper who you want to pray for. And then you take that piece of paper and you stick it up in the wall. See those papers in the wall? There's just thousands of people that visit every day. And I'm walking up here on the women's side. The men's side was on the other side of like a little wall. But that's the wall. That's the wall where thousands of people pray every day.
It also has been called the Wailing Wall, but now they refer to it as the Western Wall.
They don't like you calling it Wailing Wall, but everybody cries there, so I had to. But so in advance, I wrote down the names of the people that, this is where I want you to stop, Connie.
Yep.
I wrote down the names of the people that I wanted to pray for, many of you here. And, here we go. I had that ready in advance. And so you had to wait your turn when you went up to the wall. You can see there, we were 5 or 6 people, women deep, waiting to get up to put our little paper in the wall. And as I'm standing there waiting, I start to hear this cry. Now, if you're a mom you know, when your kids cry, you know the cry. There's some, they're just being a brat. You know that when they're hungry, you know all these sounds. But I could hear this baby crying, and this baby was in pain, some kind of a pain. Now, if you're a mom, you know that feeling. You know that cry. It's very different than any other cry. This was a suffering baby, and I could hear it crying. And I thought, what is that sound? That's so unfamiliar to me. I'm thinking about all these things, and I see out of the corner of my eye to the right, there's this woman in the traditional garb with the scarf over her head and the long gown and everything, and she's cradling something here. And I knew in my heart that baby was suffering. I knew that cry, and I knew that woman was there asking God to help her baby. For me, in my mind's eye, I thought that baby was dying, and she was praying for her child. Now, if you're a mom, you know your biggest fear in life is that you would lose a child. That's your biggest fear, because that you would rather go yourself than have your child suffer or die. And where I was touched was all these people I was thinking about, you know, their suffering, what they're going through, their challenges. Nothing was as big or as painful as what this woman was praying for. And so I kind of felt a little guilty about praying for, in a way, selfish things, because nobody's problem was as big as hers. And so I found myself on that wall praying for this woman, praying for this baby. But it put things in perspective for me, because none of the people on my list were suffering of the loss of a child, were suffering that mom's ultimate fear. And so as I got to the wall and I put my paper up in the wall, there's some pictures of me putting my paper in the wall and putting my hand on the wall, and Connie praying. Connie was taking a picture of me, and my friend Judy was taking a picture of me. And so afterwards, I looked through my pictures because I wanted so bad to see this woman and this baby, and she wasn't there. There was no picture in my pictures or in Connie's pictures of this woman with the baby. So like Connie said, we were going so fast it was hard to think about things till later. But later I thought, was she really there? Did I really see her, or was God telling me, your problems are minor compared to the problems of the world, the problems of suffering and poverty and just things as big as a mother's baby that was ill. And so to me, I didn't know if she was actually there, or maybe God was just telling me a story. You know how he'll sneak up on you and tell you these life lessons. And so, interestingly enough, Connie and I were going through these pictures that we got from Barb Walden from the Historic Sites Foundation. And here is this picture. Connie, will you go back to that picture? There she is. She was there. I wasn't imagining that. She was there with that baby. She had unwrapped from her scarves, and she was bringing that baby right up behind me, up to the wall to pray. So that was my perspective, is that thousands of people come to that wall to pray from all over the world for many things, significant things. And we as Christians pray for many things, but our problems or our load is very light compared to what's out there. And we need to be praying for other people. And we need to always remember that our problems are light compared to what some people have in the world.
Now, my perspective. I didn't remember hearing the mother cry. I just remembered seeing her up against the wall, holding the baby and praying. And in my mind, as I watched it, she was praying for the life of that child and the life it would have, and asking for God to bless that baby as it grew and became its own individual and its own person. So, and who knows what was right? Only she knows.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, doesn't matter. This is another lunch stop, so we can cruise through that. This is to give you the idea of the traffic in Jerusalem on the days that we were there. And they said that was very typical that time of year. This is a model. I told Ginny it's kind of a Lego model of Old Jerusalem in the Israeli Museum. And it's just a layout of Old Jerusalem. But it's not in Legos. It's actually in the stone rock. This was very moving. It was the Holocaust Museum. You could not take pictures inside the museum, so you won't see any pictures of it. These are all outside the museum, but extremely moving, depressing, just awful pictures and scenes you would see. Singing on the Way. This is our Palestinian family that we had our meal with.
George there in the middle, he was a patriarch there. He came in his tiny little car and picked us up.
Yeah, the whole family lives kind of in that apartment complex. The gal on the right knew English, and she's their daughter-in-law, which I would guess that's one reason why she was asked to be there, is because she knew English very well. The young boys you see are her sons, and the one on the left there, we threatened him that we were going to take him home with us. So he was a little concerned. He is afraid that might happen. So you'll see in one picture here that doesn't want anything to do with us because he's afraid. There we are. He's the one standing on the counter in the back. Doesn't want to be in the picture with us because I think he's afraid we're going to take him home. But, we had soda for the meal. They served soda and I believe maybe water, and then we had the traditional meal of chicken and rice.
See how sparse it is? They don't have all the decor on the walls. They're very minimal things.
And then this was the day we spent the whole day. They dropped us off at 7 o'clock, I think, in the morning, and picked us up maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Old Jerusalem. We entered through Herod's Gate, and we'll exit later through Zion's Gate. But this is the beginning of a long trek. And some of the first things we saw were the booths with food and fruit and marketplace selling, dry goods and different things like this. This picture is, again, another different perspective. Do you want to go first? You want me to?
Well, this is another full testimony for me, but look how happy I am to be walking in those streets. Look at my face.
I wasn't going to put this picture in, but I decided it kind of went with her testimony.
Because I had a walking stick there, and you needed it all the time. Look how uneven the ground is. It's slanted. There's steps, and then there's not steps. There's shops all along. Once you get up in there, you'll see in other pictures. I mean, you had to watch. I didn't get to look up the whole time. I didn't get to shop. I didn't get nothing. I had to stare down at the ground because I was going to fall. I knew I was going to fall on the Via Dolorosa, the road where Jesus walked. So we're walking the exact same way Jesus carried the cross. And it's uneven and it's crooked and it's horrible. It's just horrible. Narrow. Sometimes a little cart would come by us. I never looked up the whole time. And what occurred to me later, I was just miserable. I didn't feel well. The flu was coming on. I was miserable the whole time, feeling sorry for myself. Okay, so 2,020 years ago, Jesus was walking this. He wasn't looking up any of the time. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't trying to enjoy himself and to have the food. They had all this food along the way. And it occurred to me that for I'm carrying 100 pounds of extra weight I shouldn't be carrying. He's carrying a 100-pound cross. It occurred to me that maybe I wasn't supposed to be having a good old time coming up this road up to the Calvary. Maybe I was supposed to be focused. Maybe I was supposed to be looking down as he looked down the whole way up there. I'm telling you, for me, it was one of the worst parts of it. It was the suffering part of the trip for me because I had to be careful every single step. I could have fallen. I could have stumbled. And afterwards thinking, he was carrying this cross. He was hurting. He was in pain. He was bleeding, and he was stumbling and falling, carrying this burden for all eternity for us. So to me, as exhibited in my face, it was the worst part of the trip for me. But later, I kind of got it when I realized that maybe I wasn't supposed to be happy and experiencing the fun shopping and all that. I was supposed to be focused on what I was going to, which was Calvary.
And again, I was just the opposite. This was my favorite day, was walking these streets where Jesus walked, and the crowds of people. I could just see him walking through the crowds of people, and like the woman, wasn't maybe necessarily on these streets, but when he was in crowds, the woman that grabbed his robe, and he knew immediately, even among this mass of people, that someone touched him. I could just see him walking among the marketplaces, around the breads and the fruits. I don't know. It was just, I just thoroughly enjoyed the day, even though it wasn't easy walking all the places that we walked to, but it was probably one of my favorite days of the trip. These are just some of the stores we saw. They're baking bread there.
Yeah, that's what they call bagels. Look how big they are.
And sesame bread, and they're making fresh falafel, which may have tasted better than what we had.
No, they were horrible.
Okay. This is St. Anne's Church. We went there. We actually took some time to sing some hymns there, and because the acoustics were very good inside the church.
Yeah, the good old Catholic church, and we're singing, what was
Restoration hymn.
We're singing
I can't
Fire
remember.
of God like a fire is
yeah.
burning.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Catholic church.
Good old restoration hymns. They had a lot of, they loved to bathe, and they had a lot of baths.
bathed a
That's
lot.
what they are. Those are on the right. This is where, again, I can't read. Jesus healed the, can you read that, Ginny? I can't read it up that far.
He healed the sick near this place.
Yeah.
These were medicinal baths after that because he healed the sick here.
And now we are starting the Via Dolorosa, and this is our first stop there in Jesus' walk with the cross, in Antonio's fortress, the caves that Jesus was in during his arrest. And then these are different stations of the Via Dolorosa. As you'll see, there's, I don't have all 7 of them, but those are just some of it numbers them, and then the sculptures, metal, brass sculptures along with those. Again, more of the marketplace, some of the stations. This is just shows you the busy streets. This is the Holy Sepulchre. This is where Pontius Pilate sentenced Jesus to the cross. Beautiful church on the inside. Beautiful. And that is where you said Jesus' body was washed.
When they took Jesus' body off the cross, they laid him down at this spot here, and they bathed him. The women, if you remember, the women cleaned him up before they took him to the cave. And so a lot of people were down there touching that. There was some water there touching that area.
Just again to show you the mass of people that were there the day we were there. That was the Syrian Orthodox Church, and that was our guide's church. That was the one restroom we had break. We were able to use their restroom. That was our lunch spot for the day. Not quite sure what that is on the right. This is the traditional site of the upper room of the Last Supper. And then we were walking over to Caiaphas's house. Again, the views from there, the door entering that church, that house.
And that's where Jesus was kept Well, we was
arrested.
waiting for where he was arrested in the basement of Caiaphas' house, so we was awaiting sentencing there.
Yeah, and there you see him when the picture of how he may have looked when he was arrested, and he has his hands are bound there in that sculpture, and this goes down to the caves where they may have left him. Some of our group. And then we had the opportunity to go to a laser light show, and it showed the whole history of Israel. And it was, you can't see the wall, but it's just kind of looks like a castle. And it was about a 2-hour show, hour and a half. We froze. It was very cold, but it was beautiful. And then this is Masada National Park. It is, they said, should be considered one of the national wonders of the world. It's built high up on a mountain, and Herod commissioned it to be built so he could hopefully hide his people there, or even hide himself there, and keep his enemies away. But you can see the Dead Sea in the background.
The blue way back there.
Yeah, in the back.
We had to ride up this big, huge tram to go up there. It was way high.
And they hauled these rocks up there. You know, they didn't have a tram to go up to haul these rocks. If you can look on the right, I believe there black lines in the stones. Somewhere in one of these pictures, there are black lines. Anyway, the black lines represent, below the black line is the original, above the black line is how they've finished the structure. There's more up there. That's our whole group up in Masada. Now we're going to the Dead Sea. And pictures of us at the Dead Sea and our group. A couple camels waiting to be ridden or kissed. And there we are in the Dead Sea. I don't know if you can see us in the background there. We're kind of, Ginny's on the right.
See the big blob there floating right there, and then Connie's facing you with her feet up in the air.
Yeah. And then this is just what people do when they get that. Mud is supposed to be extremely good for your skin, your body, so they just cover themselves all over. And
10 times salt content of the regular sea, so you just sit in it and you float.
yeah.
But nothing lives in it because of that salt content.
And actually, my camera died at the Dead Sea, so I had to switch to using my phone. This is us at the home of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. Some more views from Qumran. Then we moved on to Jericho. And again, this is not an easy journey, an easy walk. It would have to take people in those days a long time to get those places. Jericho is the lowest place on earth, and it's the oldest city on the earth. And this is where I got to have my camel kiss. 3 of us. And I had to pay $2 for that, I think. I think it was $2. Kiss that camel. I wish I'd have kissed him back instead of that look I had, but is what it is. This is the Garden of Gethsemane. Beautiful garden and the actual active olive trees.
Yep. Did you put that picture of you reaching in there to
I
get
did.
Everett?
I did.
She reached inside there where the olives were and grabbed an olive to bring back to Everett.
Everett, that's where I'm getting your olive.
And that's me behind you, behind that little carved thing there is where Jesus prayed in Gethsemane, and it showed how he laid on supposedly this rock here and prayed in Gethsemane, and so I had to lay on the rock and pray in Gethsemane like Jesus.
Another church of all nations. This is Orson Hyde Memorial Gardens, one of our church history people. And it was a high up, beautiful view of Jerusalem. And very quiet. It's probably one of the most serene, besides the garden, most serene and quiet places that we went to. Just a lot of, they weren't the typical stop for the typical tourist. This is Brigham Young University, Jerusalem Center for Eastern Studies. So we made a stop there. This is inside that facility.
Played the organ for us there.
Yeah, they played a pipe organ they had there. There's our 87-year-old going strong. And we had several couples and people in their 80s on the trip. I don't know that they knew what they were getting into, but one of them had broke her foot a week or two before she went. It's an olive press. There's Jean. She's giving us some more church history spots and locations in Jerusalem. Which one of those Jerry's great uncle may have lived in, I don't know for sure. This is a garden tomb, and this is one of the other spots that they are positive that this was his tomb. Right, Ginny?
Correct. This was one they could verify historically that this was Jesus' tomb. This is where he was buried. This is where the stone got rolled away. When you see Connie and I rolling the stone away, you'll see this wasn't the stone, but this is the actual site.
Yeah.
And we were blessed to have communion on that site. Those brothers at the olive tree factory made us some little wooden cups, mine's out on my table out there. And Peter, our pastor on the trip, we were served communion out of those little olive wood cups there. It was pretty cool.
So that ended that day there at the gardens, at the garden tomb. And then we made our way to Egypt. We left our two wonderful guides and went through customs and border check and all that stuff. And we did have a police escort, 3-car police escort, the rest of the trip while we were in Egypt.
Now, the two guides, the interesting thing about them, the one in the left with the blue hat, he was a Christian. The guy on the right, which was our bus driver, he was a Muslim. And typically they don't get along too well, the Muslims and the Palestinians, but they were friends, and they said they hoped that this was a sign of the future of their country.
This is the view of the Red Sea, which is not red, but I think the way it got its name was the fish were red that were in it. Now, I did not go on this trip, so Ginny, if you have anything to say. They went to St. Catherine's Monastery in Mount Sinai. You had a choice of going there, and it was an 8-hour trip from Jerusalem to our end of the day stop on a bus, cramped like this. And so I chose to stay home and relax, and Ginny went on this.
Well, this was a trip out to Mount Sinai. So these are the mountains of Sinai. And if you remember, this is where God spoke to Moses, and not once but twice. And this is St. Catherine's Monastery, which is covering the site where the burning bush is. So I had to see the burning bush. I had to stand on holy ground. So there was a small group of us, like 21 of us, that went on up to Mount Sinai and to St. Catherine's to see the burning bush. And I think it's the next one. On your left-hand side, that big green, not the little one, but the big green greenery there is the burning bush. And this interesting thing about this is this bush grows nowhere else in the world. They try to do clippings to make it grow, and they cannot get it to grow anywhere but on this site, but they can date it back to the days of Moses. Also on this site is Jethro's well. If you remember, Moses met his wife at Jethro's well, and that's there. And we got to see that. That's why they can accurately say this is where on Mount Sinai, God spoke to Moses.
And this is just, on the right, I got my first massage I'd ever had in my life at that resort that we were in. So that's a picture of that, the Red Sea. This is our last morning on the Sinai Peninsula. We stayed in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is the,
Vegas of...
Yeah, the Vegas of
Rich people
Egypt. It's where they have the peace talks, actually. All the nations go there for the peace talks.
Bill Gates has a little island there. I mean, it's beautiful. It's like being in Hawaii, tropical.
We went out on a glass bottom boat. This is
The
another
camel.
fun picture of we were driving up to Cairo. Is a camel getting his own camel ride.
VIP camel there.
Yeah. And that's just the lunch stop. As I said, there's more graffiti, but the walls are just covered with it. This is ours. That was the Suez Canal. This is Moses Well. And this is a little Bedouin market that was near at this stop as well, and a Bedouin lady.
This is my favorite shot. This is a Bedouin lady. They used to do different things, the Bedouins, but as you hear in the Bible, but now they sell trinkets to tourists. And I just told her how beautiful she was. Could I take her picture? And look at her smiling eyes. Isn't she gorgeous?
And this is a mosque in Cairo, where beautiful at night. Well, had colorful lights, and it was really, really pretty at night. It's pretty there, but it was beautiful at night. And some of the inside of that. And we had to wear, there was one place we had to wear scarves when we went inside the mosque. Egyptian Museum, which is just phenomenal. They are currently in the process of moving it. It will be over near the pyramids. I think the move is next October. But the pictures we have just doesn't even give you a real glimpse as to what's truly on the inside of this museum. A lot of King Tut stuff and other pharaohs and wives and families and jewels and gems. And it was just amazing, the traffic in Cairo. They have 23 million people. The road, which is like our interstate, had no lines. So there was one point we looked out, and you could count 7 lanes of traffic. And then the next thing you know, you look down, and there would be a guy on a motorcycle zipping between you and your bus and the next car. It was just amazing. And then you'd see donkeys and horses out pulling wagons and such. Tons of garbage because they don't have a system to clean their cities, a very good system. Here we are at the pyramids of Giza, our whole group with the pyramids in the background. And this is me in different shots on the pyramids. And this is how many poses can you have on a camel. And that was $5 maybe, I can't remember. It wasn't very much to ride the camel. But you just go down a little ways. That's one of my favorite shots of me, is with the Sphinx back there. And that isn't photocopied or anything. That was the actual scene.
The sun was going down. Isn't that a great
Yeah,
shot?
on the pyramid. This is the papyrus paper that we learned about, and you'll see some samples of the papyrus out on the tables of some of our artifacts and things we brought home. That was an impulsive, quick purchase of mine. But it is pretty. And then this is the original capital of Egypt. And Ramesses. Tammy, that's for you. Are you still here, Tammy? That picture's for you.
Dog.
That's Nala's ancestors. They had dogs all over the place.
Dogs and cats everywhere.
Yeah. Israel had a lot of cats. Egypt had a lot of dogs. They had a few both. But this was a school field trip that I watched as we were in that location. Watched the kids interact, and it was fun. This is another pyramid that we went to, the step pyramid. This is a carpet Egyptian rug factory, which is interesting. They use children to make these rugs, primarily because children have small, tiny hands. And then they also educate them. So they have to do so many hours of school, and then they do so many hours of work. But these rugs were amazing. There's some samples of the different rugs that have been made. And you'll see some
Expensive too.
Yeah, small samples of little things we bought out on the tables. We couldn't afford these. Well, maybe Ginny could. I don't know.
No.
Another lunch stop. And then this is Old Cairo. We walked through and around. This is another church. Church of the Saints Sergius and Bacchus. And here we are at the end of the day, and at the end of our trip, we took a ride in a felucca ride on the Nile.
No motorized power at all. It's all powered by the wind.
Boat, and then
Our boat driver, he's got that big stick under his arm there that's like a rudder. That's all they use, the wind, the sails, and the rudder. It was very beautiful.
and the sun went down quickly on that. And that ended our trip. Thank you for your listening ears and your patience and all that.
Well, now the choir's going to come up. One of my friends, Sandy Ertwig, I don't know if she's here today, but she saw these pictures online and she said, "Oh, you've got to have somebody sing the song, I Walk Today Where Jesus Walks." So we asked the choir to put an ensemble together here and sing that song for you today.
Thank you, choir, for that. It is a great hymn, and it kind of put together what we experienced on this pilgrimage. I wanted just to share with you in the closing that you don't have to travel 6,567 miles to walk where Jesus walked. Every time, see, I cry every time. Every time you visit a sick person, you walk where Jesus walked. Every time you volunteer at a food pantry, you walk where Jesus walked. Every time you drop money into a basket, you reach out to somebody in need. You send a card to a shut-in. You take communion. You touch a child's face. You walk where Jesus walked. He came here to teach us to walk the way he walked. He came here so that all of us can walk where Jesus walked. Would I say go to this place? Absolutely. Experience it. But you don't have to. You can experience it here every day in your lives. You can give of your own wonderful blessings that you've been taught. So, I challenge you before you go today to tell the story of Jesus in your way, in your life, and to walk where Jesus walked. What is your pilgrimage? Where and how will you walk where Jesus walked? As Connie said before, we have brought back many artifacts from our trip. I have some running slides in the front and some of the things I brought back. Connie has a full table in the back, so stop by and take a look. And thank you all for coming today.